This is a sarsen stone. That's right, the same sort of stone used to build Stonehenge. But what's it doing by the roadside in a tiny Essex village? And what's it got to do with a letter a Pope wrote to an abbot about to leave for Britain in 601 AD? We had a theory, so we jumped in Hetty and went to look for ourselves. Can we park in there? The stones sit around Saint Barnabas Church in Alphamstone in Essex, on a hilltop above the River Stour. Those stones don't belong here. They were almost certainly dragged up from the river below. When we arrived, we were expecting to sort of hunt for fragments, but we were greeted by these two huge stones at the entrance to the pathway to the church. Then we walked the churchyard. They were everywhere, not fragments, proper massive sarsens. The effort to bring these up here must have been monumental. St Barnabas feels old the moment you stand in front of it. The door alone could be 700 years old. But it's when you go inside where the story really changes. In a book we bought at Stonehenge, there's a section on Christianised pagan sites. It opens with a letter from Pope Gregory to the Abbot Mellitus in 601, who was on his way to Britain to convert the Anglo-Saxons. In it he describes quite clearly that the existing temples were not to be destroyed, but to be cleansed and reused. Standing in the churchyard at Alphamstone, you can clearly see the proof of this. The church is on a hilltop. It has yew trees all around it, and it has the sarsen stones intentionally put there. This place was sacred far before the church arrived. And the west wall of the church contains something amazing. Either side of the window, built into the very foundations, are two huge sarsen stones. proof that they did exactly what Gregory told them to. Investigating further around the church, we found the same marks that we found at St Mary's in Chickney, scratched into the doors, the windows, even the porch seat by the north door. We did some research and we found that these were ancient symbols that were intended to protect the church against evil spirits. People thought that evil spirits weren't that clever and that they had to follow where a line went. So, if you had a pattern of lines, they would get trapped and held there forever. Coupled with putting them by a window or a door, you could direct the spirits out of the church or hold them on the outside of the church. And as if that isn't enough evidence to show that the church is built on a pre-existing site, Bronze Age burial urns, Iron Age urns and Roman pottery fragments have been found in and around the churchyard, showing that people have been living here and bringing their dead here for well over 1,000 years before the church arrived. I've often thought about old churchyards. Nearly every important moment in your life used to happen inside them. Baptism, marriage, and finally the goodbyes. You weren't just standing in a building, you were standing in a place surrounded by your ancestors. The same ground that held your grandparents, it held you when you were married. When you had your first child and you brought it to be named, it held you. It would hold you at the end. That everyday sense of being surrounded by your ancestors has largely gone. Modern life moves families on. The local churchyard that holds generation after generation, for many of us, no longer does that. I felt the weight of it when my mother died. I was 17 and my brother was 24. When he married in his 30s later, he insisted that it was at the church where my mother was buried, so she could be there. It wasn't a grand statement. It was simply the need for her to be present on that special day. That need is older than any of us. The same instinct that filled these churchyards is the same instinct that filled these pagan sites with stones and burial urns. Alphamstone shows the long version of this instinct. Bronze Age burial urns, sarsen stones dragged up from the river and then built into the very walls of the church. People have kept returning to this hilltop. The early church didn't break this thread, it merely continued it. Those stones are still here, and standing among them, you can still feel what was never completely erased. The wish to mark the important moments of life, surrounded by those that went before, on the same ground that has held the same quiet attention for centuries.